Good day to each and every one of you. I am Cyril.
I am Narjana.
Hi, I am Danica.
Hi, I'm Lenny Shai.
And I am Kinaros Mirotinoy, and we are the reporters for this week.
The title of our topic for Lesson 13 is Taking Charge of One's Health. At the end of this report, you may be able to explain or understand the concept of stress, know or discuss the dimension of stress, identify strategies to control stress, and develop your own self-care. Medical professionals often encourage us to avoid stress in order to stay healthy. Stress triggers life-threatening illness such as cancer, hypertension, heart attack, high blood pressure, and many others. It also causes an individual to make hasty and risky decisions. Drastic action, whether physical or verbal, may also arise from stress. Stress has a lot of negative consequences. There is a need for a high level of patience and emotional quotient in order to deal with everyday stressors. Now let's tackle stress. Stress refers to the reaction of our physiological and psychological self to any kind of demand or threat. Right off the bat, one could already claim that not all stress is negative or unwanted. Sometimes, there are positive stresses that are aptly called eustress. In general, stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. It is a mental and physical response to the demands of your environment. It is normal to feel stressed. It is a universal human experience. What is more important is how you respond to stress. Not all stress is bad for you. In fact, stress is good for human beings to some degree to maintain an overall good health. The human body may tend toward a relatively stable equilibrium, especially those maintained by physiological process. Yet it also requires stimulation to ensure optimal functioning of the organs and tissues, such as the heart and muscles. How can stress be good? When stress serves as a motivation for positive activities, then it is considered beneficial beyond its optimal point. Stress of any kind does more harm than good. There are three kinds of stress. These are eustress, neustress, and distress. Eustress is considered as a good stress, a result from a situation or activity that you find motivating or inspiring, enjoyable, and not threatening. Examples of eustress are the excitement of a roller coaster ride, a scary movie, or a fun challenge, the anticipation of a first date, the first day at a new job, or other exciting firsts also fall under the umbrella of eustress. Eustress is a type of stress that is actually important for us to have in our lives. Next, we have neustress or neutral stress, a sensory stimulus that has no direct consequence or effect on the person, a situation or activity that you do not find threatening yet not enjoyable. It is considered neither good nor bad. Examples of neustress are incidents you hear in the news. News of an earthquake in a remote corner of the world might fall in this category. Hearing about devastating natural disasters in the other part of the world can create neustress. Lastly, we have distress, the opposite of eustress. Distress is an adjective that describes a general feeling of unhappiness. It can also describe feeling stressed out and tired because of worry, situation or activities that you considered negative, harmful, threatening, that could happen for just a short span of time, or it could linger for prolonged periods such as hours, days, months, and years. Examples of distress are long-standing family quarrel, the death of a loved one, not getting into the college of your choice, or losing a job. These are common things that we might associate with negative stress. Now let's discuss about stressors. A stressor is an event that compels a person to adjust or change. Any situation, activity, or individual that gives you mental or emotional strain is a stressors. The list of stressors is not only endless, it also varies from person to person. Good stressors can make you feel both nervous, excited at the same time, the so-called butterflies in your stomach. It makes you worry about being liked or accepted. On the other hand, bad stressors can cause you to feel angry, petrified, or depressed. It can make you feel constantly on the edge. Other than the mental and emotional strain, you also suffer pain, such as headache, or you actually get sick, such as going down with a fever. High level of stress when unattended contribute to mental health problems. These are common stressors that are described as unpleasant and life-threatening. First, we have catastrophic events and life-threatening experiences. Are abrupt, unforeseen experiences or traumas such as natural calamities, military combats, terrorist attacks, accidents, and physical and sexual abuses. Second, we have life changes and strains, include separation of parents, illness in the family, change of workplace, transfer of domicile, and other circumstances that demand people to adjust. Thirdly, we have chronic problems. Exists for a long period, which includes circumstances such as suffering from serious illness, having irresponsible neighbors, and failure to acquire a lucrative or high-income job. Lastly, we have everyday hassles, are irritations, pressures, and annoyances that may not be significant stressors by themselves, by whose cumulative effect can be significant. Examples are traffic, waiting in a long time to get a taxi, or just a bad day when everything goes wrong. And that's all for my part in this report. Now, I'll be giving the next part to Nurjana Tabwa.
What are signs and symptoms of stress? Stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires adjustment or response. The body reacts to these changes with physical, mental, and emotional responses. People handle stress differently. Symptoms of stress can vary. Some people who are unable to properly manage stress are vulnerable to unhealthy habits like drug addiction, alcoholism, cigarette smoking, or poor diet. When these unhealthy habits persist, those are lead to undesirable behaviors. Several symptoms may be observed from people under stress. Symptoms can be physical, behavioral, or emotional. Physical symptoms of stress include low energy, headaches, upset stomach, including diarrhea, constipation, and nausea, aches, pains, and tense muscles, chest pain and rapid heartbeat, insomnia, frequent colds and infections, loss of sexual desire and or ability, nervousness and shaking, ringing in the ear, cold or sweaty hands and feet, excess sweating, dry mouth and difficulty in swallowing, clenched jaw and grinding teeth. Cognitive perceptual symptoms of stress includes forgetfulness, preoccupation, blocking, error in judging distance, reduced creativity, lack of concentration, lack of attention to detail, orientation to the past, attention deficit, disorganization of thought, negative self-statement, and negative evaluation of experiences. Emotional symptoms of stress includes depression or general unhappiness, anxiety and agitation, moodiness, irritability or anger, feeling overwhelmed, loneliness and isolation, any other mental or emotional health problems. Factors of stress: physiological, cognitive, socioeconomic, and culture.
Physiological.
The body goes through 3 stages of
Physiological.
reactions during stressful events: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. The effects of stress are manifested in a model developed by psychologist Hans Selye, who proposed the general adaptation syndrome. He suggests that the body goes through 3 stages of
Physiological reaction.
during stressful events: the alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. Alarm is the initial reaction to a stressful situation. In trying to cope with the initial effects of stress, the sympathetic nervous system is activated and releases hormones such as cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine that help the body to fight off stress. However, the continued increase in these hormones could also adversely affect the body, such as increase in blood pressure, heart rate, and blood sugar. In the resistant stage, the body adapts to the stress but continues to release hormones that help the body to adapt and fight off the harmful effects of stress. The body can eventually suffer fatigue if stress continues. If the stress is not properly dealt with, the person will experience exhaustion, in which the body may suffer psychosomatic illnesses, including colds, flu, allergies, headache, muscle pain, as well as those that may have irreversible damages to one's health, such as heart disease, ulcer, diabetes, stroke, cancer, or death. Cognitive, the way people think about and appraise a stressor, is a major factor in how stressful that particular stressor becomes. Cognitive psychologist Richard Lazarus has developed a cognitive view of stress. In his theory, he suggests that the way people think about and appraise a stressor is a major factor in how stressful that particular stressor becomes. Lazarus believes that there is a two-step process in appraising the degree of threat or harm of a stressor and how one should react to that stressor: primary appraisal and secondary appraisal. In primary appraisal, the individual appraises the severity of the stressor and classifies it as a threat, a challenge, or a harm or loss. If the stressor is seen as a challenge, example, quiz, exam, the individual may perceive it as less stressful and more likely to cope well. However, if the stressor is seen as a threat, negative emotions may ensue: anxiety, anger, aggression, apathy, depression, and psychological impairment. Socioeconomic: experiencing poverty or receiving low compensation means higher stress level as parents take on multiple roles. Achieving balance between work and family becomes a source of stress. Even if a person has a job and is making an adequate salary, there are stresses associated with workplace that add to the daily stressor, such as work overload, long hours, and poor physical work environment. Research indicates that overcrowding and living in poor housing conditions can be a source of stress. Traffic and lack of transportation can also be enormously stressful. Culture: a person from one culture who must live in another culture may experience a great deal of stress. In the culture perspective, a person from one culture who must live in another culture may experience a great deal of stress. For example, one primary source of stress imposed on immigrant Filipino workers in other countries is the need to adapt to a new culture. Acculturation is the process of adaptation by which immigrants, native groups, and ethnic minority groups adjust to the new culture, making behavioral and attitudinal changes. Acculturative stress refers to the feelings of tension and anxiety that accompany efforts to adapt to the orientation and values of a dominant culture. Perhaps the greatest stress is when migrant Filipino workers experience discrimination, stereotyping, and prejudice because of racism and anti-immigrant attitudes. For example, one primary source of stress imposed on immigrant Filipino workers in other countries is the need to adapt to a new culture. Acculturation is the process of adaptation by which immigrants, native groups, and ethnic minority groups adjust to the new culture, making behavioral and attitudinal changes. Acculturative stress refers to the feelings of tension and anxiety that accompany efforts to adapt to the orientation and values of a dominant culture.
Social and cultural dimensions of stress. Culturally and socially, stress is typically viewed negatively. Recent researcher, however, it is revealed that the stress is a neutral concept. What was originally seen as a negative factor can now be viewed otherwise. Stress on Filipinos. The effect of culture on stress and coping is so pervading that the people within the cultural group do not notice it. But when cultural contexts are compared, the differences between how people deal with stress become striking. American anthropologist and professor Mary Catherine Bateson told an anecdote about her experience of losing a premature infant while she was here in the Philippines. She noted the differences on how Americans and Filipinos express sympathy over the loss of a loved one. Bateson described that while Americans will shake hands, nod their head, and sadly say, "We are so sorry for your loss," they will make a hasty retreat and leave the family to mourn in private. Bateson observed that Filipino, other than expressing sympathy over the loss, would ask questions and will get you to talk about your beloved departed at length. She added that the primary assumption in Filipino culture is that those who suffered a loss should not be left mourning alone. As cited in Aldwin 2007, Americans who are unaware of this Filipino cultural value would see this behavior as an instruction. A Filipino, on the other hand, would think that Americans do not grieve for their dead. While some societies show their recognition of bereavement around an effort to help the bereaved control himself, herself, and forget the sorrow. Other societies are more inclined to help the bereaved express his or her loss and live out the grief. It is cited in Levine 1973, page 17 to 18, culture can affect stress and coping process in four ways. First is cultural context shapes the kind of stressor that individual is likely to experience. For example, Europeans find crowded places stressful because they crave privacy, while Filipinos are delighted to see a crowd, like, "Uy, may kasiyahan." Number 2, culture may also affect the appraisal of a certain event. For instance, noise is stressful, but what kind of noise? Some people find the Philippine streets with all the honking, pedaling, and shouting noisy, yet they have no problem listening to their songs on high volume. Number 3, culture affects an individual's coping strategies as was displayed by Catherine Bateson's story. Number 4, culture provides different time-honored tools, mechanism by which individuals can cope up with stress. Filipino traits and values. Philosopher, professor, and author Emerita Quito proposed to take a second look at the supposed negative Filipino traits and values. Quito wrote that Filipinos are fond of comparing themselves unfavorably with Westerners by using Western standards. Thus, she discussed some Filipino traits within the Oriental cultural context. According to Quito, if the ideal personality and activity is based on Western ideas, such as being a workaholic as a positive trait, then the Filipino, stress-free mentally, will fare poorly. In contrast to Western culture, Orientals emphasizes conformity with nature, as cited by Quito in 1994, and are not inclined to exaggerate or overreact. Moreover, if the basis for achievement by Western culture is to amass earthly wealth, then Filipinos will be again ranked low because we look at some other considerations aside from material wealth when pursuing our goals. As pointed out by Quinto, setting a goal is not wrong in any culture. The difference between cultures lies what people consider important, as well as the manner of pursuing these goals. Western culture thrives on individuality, and threat to one's independence is a source of stress, hence it must be removed. Filipinos, on the other hand, thrive on maintaining a harmonious relationship. Any disruption to this harmony is stressor, hence it must be avoided. The table below shows some Filipino traits and how they are evaluated based on Western and Oriental cultures as discussed by Quinto in 1994. Filipino traits and values, why it is negative in Western concept, why it is positive in Oriental concept. Here, it stops from taking action. It makes the person weak, timid, and meek. And in positive side, it contributes the peace of mind. Not trying to achieve makes for a less hurried and stressful life. Ningas kugon, it makes a person an underachiever because he or she cannot persevere in seeing things like, in example, projects, tasks, or goals to its fruition. This trait makes for a peaceful and tranquil life because one is unruffled should things go wrong. Being detached allows the person to move on to some other activities without feeling like an absolute failure. Pakikisama. Filipinos are said to turn a blind eye to the wrongdoing of others for the sake of personal relationships. Examples: family, friendship, co-worker. In the Filipino context, pakikisama means keeping a polite distance from other people's lives with whom we share the same space with to maintain and harmony. Patigasan. It is about being stubborn and resisting reconciliation. One stands his or her ground and wait for other party to take the first step at the reconciliation. A trait that makes us stand for what is right and refuse to be intimidated or forced to submission are part of the positive Oriental concept. Bahala na. It leaves everything a chance with the help of a divine power. Putting a faith on a highest being develops humility and gratefulness. The idea that he or she is not alone in the struggle strengthens the Filipino psyche. Kasi disowns responsibility, puts blames of others, people, things, circumstances, does not become overly stressed for failing. Failure is not a personal because there are other factors, not just me. Will not stress out because of guilt feelings or self-recrimination. Saving face is closely related to hiya, and it encourages shirking from responsibility. It promotes mental therapy because it allows the person to keep his or her dignity. Sakop never learns to be independent. Relies on family and relatives, prevents personal growth, encourages partnership, promotes unity, especially in the family. Provide a sense of belongingness and security. Bukas na is part of manana habit. Promotes laziness. Will not act when a problem is still small, thinking that will go away by itself. Filipinos know how to keep things in stride rather than be stressed or tense. One learns to go with the flow and take what comes naturally. Utang na loob. It makes the person overlook moral principles because he or she is beholden to those who gave him or her a favor. This trait personifies the Filipino saying, ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggagalingan ay hindi makakarating sa kanyang patutunguhan. Kanya-kanya, seen as selfish with no regard for the world's well-being, this trait is still in the collective context. Kanya-kanya means take care of your own, that those are important to me, or you take care of yours. Family is central to the Filipino psyche. Those family is always given first priority before the self and everyone else. Social stress. What is social stress? It is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or every demanding circumstances arising from the person's social environment relationship. There are several sources of social stress, and they can affect almost every area in your life. Social stress gets aggravated when you have little capability to change your circumstances. Sociological perspective stress and the sociological perspective by Emil Durkheim's book of suicide shows how social organization of groups individuals influence behavior of their members. Durkheim hypothesizes that the extent to which an individual is integrated within a group affects the likelihood of suicide. There are three types of suicide: the egoistic suicide, altruistic suicide, and anomic suicide. Egoistic occurs when a person feels he or she is not accepted by or not belong to society. The social bond is very weak. Altruistic occurs when a person ends his or her life for others. Anomic is linked to delusionment and disappointment. Anomic was a concept Durkheim developed to describe a state where social and or moral norms were confused, unclear, or simply not present. This is similar to egoism in that social bonds are very weak. However, its distinction is that weak social bond is due to occurring social changes. Durkheim's study showed how personal problems are influenced by social forces. Source of social stress. What are the sources of social stress? The sources of social stress include, but are not limited to, problems which work or earning an income, parenting, education, sex and socialization, immigration status or language, personal, physical, psychological health, peer pressure, and social marginalization. Social status is seen as common denominator for social stress. For example, if you are poor, it usually means having less income opportunity, lower quality of education, and decreased access to proper health care. These problems typically contribute to problems in interpersonal relationship, such as in marriage and in parenting. The numerous problems that people in the lower social status could evoke a feeling of powerlessness. Being unable to change his or her situation makes the person more susceptible to stress. Peer pressure also becomes dangerous when drugs, alcohol, smoking, and gambling are involved. The role of social class, race, and gender in social stress. Social class. Those who are in the lower class have higher mental and emotional stress than those who are affluent. There are three common factors, and these are inadequate financial resources, greater use and effective coping strategies, and less access to social support. Race. Research shows that response to stress vary and the person's ethnicity is relevant to his or her stress responses. Ronald Kessler and Harold Neighbors of 1986 found out that even when social class is controlled, race continues to be an important predictor of distress. Their studies showed that African American women still feel more stress compared with European American females of the same social class. However, African American women also have more access to social support than European American females. This may help explain the pattern that even though Americans often experience higher levels of stress than white Americans females, they have lower levels of mental disorder. Gender. Women were found to have higher rates of psychological distress and depression compared to men. According to Rosenfeld, 1999, this is evidence across culture over time in different age groups, in rural as well as in urban areas, and in treated as well as untreated populations. Possible causes for the high disparity between women and men are: women tend to be delegated to the caregiver role more than men. Women are more included to be emotionally involved in the lives of the people around them. Women interject rather than express anger. Interjection is a person's ability to take in the expectations and projections of others, like in communicated non-verbally or verbally, covertly or overtly, and take this as a person's own. Continuing power difference between women and men in society.
Coping with stress. Problem-focused coping methods. People who have adequate coping resources and methods will suffer fewer effects of stressors compared to those who lack them. In dealing with stressful experiences, people may use coping resources which include money and time. In relation to this, those individuals who are financially disadvantaged and those who have limited or no time due to work schedule have lesser chance of eliminating the conditions that stress them. The effect of stressors can also be eliminated through the use of effective coping methods. Most of these methods can be classified as problem-focused or emotion-focused. Problems-focused coping. It targets in controlling or changing the source of stress. It tackles the source in a practical manner. Strategies include employing problem-solving techniques, time management, getting relevant social support. Problem-focused coping method. involves an attempt to change or eliminate sources of stress. Examples of this coping method are confrontations, seeking social support, and undertaking careful and deliberate problem solving. Emotion-focused coping method is aimed at controlling the negative emotional consequences of stressors. Examples of this coping method are self-control, keeping feelings to oneself, distancing, not thinking about the stressor, accepting responsibility, attributing the stress as one's creation, and wishful thinking, thinking that the situation will pass. Cognitive focus coping. Cognitive coping. It involves a conscious intellectual activity of managing stressful situations. You use your mind to combat stress-inducing thoughts. Strategies for cognitive coping include reframing, changing the way you view experiences or events, ideas, concepts, and emotion to find alternatives that are more positive. Challenging negative thinking. Questioning the rationality of your negative thoughts. You take control of your thoughts and stop negative thinking. You replace negative thoughts with positive affirmations. Positive self-talk. Sometimes referred to as positive affirmations, you talk to yourself in a positive manner. This is useful for confidence building. Count to 10, giving you time to gain control of your emotions. It allows you to rethink the situation and find a better coping strategy. Cost-benefit analysis. Asking how beneficial your thoughts, emotions, or actions are. Is it worth it? Smell the roses. Away from telling yourself to relax, it is about taking a conscious effort to appreciate the usually neglected aspects of life. Keeping perspective. Breaking down your problems into little tasks and knowing which the problems need to be addressed right away as compared to those that do not need much attention. Reducing uncertainty. As the saying goes, lamang ang may alam. Gathering as much information as you can about your problem. It helps if you gather positive information rather than negative ones. Using imagery or visualization. Imagery as a relaxation tool. You find that place on your mind where you feel happy. Remember your pleasurable experiences. This is more effective when combined with breathing exercises. Visualization is also a powerful rehearsal strategy. For example, you are about to present your report in class practice on your mind. Picture yourself giving the report. Imagine the possible question that will be asked and how you will answer it. Taking care of the self. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Why do you feel stressed? Psychologist Abraham Maslow presented a motivational theory outlining human needs illustrated in a hierarchical manner. The hierarchy of needs is in the form of a pyramid starting with the most basic and most important need at the bottom and moving up to achieve self-fulfillment. Deficiency versus growth. Maslow called the four bottom levels:
physiological,
safety, belonging, and love esteem as deficiency needs because a person does not feel anything if these needs are met, but he or she becomes anxious if these needs are not met. On the other hand, the fifth level, self-actualization, according to Maslow, was a growth need because it enables the person to reach his or her potential as a human being. Motivational by unsatisfied needs. Maslow's theory holds that human beings are motivated by unsatisfied needs. Thus, lower needs take precedence over higher needs, and they must be satisfied first. If a need is unmet, the person feels agitated, and this motivates him or her to act and find ways to satisfy the need. When a need is mostly satisfied, it is no longer a source of motivation and the person moves on to the next higher need. Maslow further stated that a person could only move up the higher level of need once the lower level is securely met, and only then will a person be motivated to work on self-actualization. Maslow's concept provides a glimpse of underlying causes of difficult behavior, as well as emotional and mental problems. This table illustrates how a person may react when needs are unsatisfied. Maslow's hierarchy needs. Physiological needs, a need that must be met every day. If not satisfied, feel sick, irritated, uncomfortable. If pathological, we can eat, drink too much, or engage in boredom behaviors. Will cause death. Safety needs can affect our perception, paranoia, can lead to neurosis, insecurity. If pathological, can lead to antisocial behavior. Belonging, love needs become increasingly susceptible to loneliness and social anxieties. If pathological, can lead to antisocial behavior. Esteem needs, two forms. Lower form needs, such as respect from others, for status, fame, glory, recognition, attention, reputation, appreciation, dignity, even dominance. Higher forms involves self-respect, including such feelings as confidence, competence, achievement, mastery, independence, and freedom. Low self-esteem, inferiority complex. If pathological, can lead to depression. Self-actualization needs can cause feelings of lack of meaning in life. If pathological, metapathologies such as boredom, cynicism, alienation, feeling isolated, detached, lack of sympathy, estrangement.
Do you take time to look after your holistic well-being? If you do, then good. If not, it's time for us to have some self-care. It is also vital for management of daily stressors and challenges, as well as a overall health and wellness. Self-care is neither overindulging nor unnecessarily depriving your self-care. The key word to self-care is a balance. Being good to yourself will enhance the likelihood of living to your fullest potential. What self-care is not? When every time you are stressed, you say, I had a rough day, so I'm going for a drink to unwind. Yes, self-care. Maybe every time you like something, you say, this is really not my budget, but I should not deprive myself because, self-care. Or, I'm so hungry, but I'm on a diet, so I won't eat. Taking care of my weight is a self-care. These notions of self-care are simplified. Proper self-care is taking a very active and powerful choice to engage in activities that will result in acquiring or maintaining optimal health that cover the physical, psychological, emotional, social, and spiritual components. Well, as described by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, satisfying the various levels of needs is very important to a person's overall health and well-being. Apart from your overall well-being and health care, is to take care of yourself. This caring for the self, however, is more than being clean or hygiene and living clean or a lifestyle. Going back to self-care refers to all activities that a person does to maintain and improve the five dimensions of a self-care, which are physical, psychological, emotional, social, and spiritual self-care. Where physical self-care includes all the activities that one does to maintain and improve his or her physical well-being, like consistently sleeping for at least 8 hours, drinking 8 glasses of water, eating healthy and nutritious foods, taking vitamins, and exercising. The next one is psychological self-care that includes all the activities one does to deal or resolve mental health issues, address both positive and negative emotions, and learn to deal with negative self-talk and self-criticisms. It also includes all the new learnings, applying consequential thinking, practicing mindfulness and creativity, like for example, is by reading a book or a journaling. And then emotional self-care that includes all the activities one does to cope with stress and deal with grief. It also involves emotional literacy, negative emotions, increasing empathy, managing stress, and developing compassion for self and others. Like for example, is learning to say no, being aware of our own boundaries, and practicing self-compassion. The next one is the social self-care that includes all the activities one does to connect with people who are valuable to her or him. It means that spending time and having great time with loved ones and other valuable people including family, friends, neighbors, schoolmates, professionals, organizations, and many more. The last dimensions of self-care is the spiritual self-care. It included all the activities one does to strengthen one's relationship with his or her beliefs. It also includes meditations and contemplations about one's purpose of existence according to his or her faith. Benefits of self-care. The first one is it will enhance productivity when a person distances himself or herself from vices like drinking liquor, smoking, and gambling. He or she will have more time to focus on his or her goals in addition to improving his or her physical well-being. Second one is it will improve vitality where physical care activities like exercising, eating the right food, drinking enough water, and getting enough sleep. It will increases the resistance to diseases, while unhealthy habits make a person vulnerable or prone to diseases. It will also enhance self-esteem where avoiding self-berating is very important. Negative self-talk is damaging to how one perceives himself or herself and may lead to anxiety and stress. It is very important for a person to discover and accept who he or she really is and be proud about himself or herself. It will increase self-knowledge after a person discovers and accepts who he or she is. It is very important for him or her to know what he or she wants and what he or she loves to do. With this, one will be able to live life to the fullest according to the purpose of he or she has. The last benefits of self-care is being mindfulness and compassion. Knowing and being good to oneself stems from goodness and compassion one directs towards other people. Many people are able to extend compassion toward others but find it difficult to extend the same compassion toward themselves. So let us discuss first on what is self-compassion. Self-compassion is defined by showing compassion to oneself. It involves being open to and moved by one's own suffering, expressing care and kindness towards oneself, taking an understanding and non-judgmental attitude towards one's inadequacies and failures, recognizing that one's own experience is the part of the common human experience. Here comes the four components of self-compassion, namely self-kindness, self-beration, common humanity, and mindfulness. First is self-kindness. It means that not being physically and verbally harsh to oneself. Second is self-beration. It is a kind verbal abuse directed to oneself. It involves an act where one blames himself or herself or his or her actions or decisions. Usually this is done by stating unkind words to oneself. Self-harm, on the other hand, is the act of harming oneself through physical means, which is both physically and psychologically damaging to an individual. The next one is common humanity, means acceptance that one is an imperfect being, one makes mistakes along with everyone else, and one does always get what he or she wants. The last one is mindfulness. It is the practice of being fully present in the moment. One has to turn toward his or her painful thoughts and emotions in order to embrace himself or herself with compassion. Compassion. It is a neutral or learned. Human beings are actually wired compassion rather than self-interest. According to scientific research, compassion framed as an emotion is the felt response to perceiving suffering that involves an authentic desire to ease distress. It is a kind and caring emotional response to perceive suffering that acknowledges that shared human experience or imperfection and that involve an authentic desire to help. Compassion is often confused with that of empathy and altruism. Although compassion does involve empathy and altruistic is behavior. However, empathy as defined by researchers is the visceral or emotional experience of another person's feelings. Altruism, on the other hand, is the unselfish regard to or devotion to the welfare of where it is commonly defined in two ways. The belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for well-being of others, and the behavior of an animal that benefits another at its own expense or a self-sacrifice. Benefits of self-compassion. Research suggests that compassion may have ensured our survival because of tremendous benefits for both physical and mental health and overall well-being. It suggests that connecting with others in a meaningful way helps to enjoy better mental and physical health and speeds up recovery from disease and may even lengthen our lifespans. The part of the brain that are active when a person experiences pleasure, where pleasures enter such as eating favorite desserts or receiving money, we found to be equally active when the person is doing acts of kindness such as giving food to a homeless person or donating to a charity. As a result, we therefore conclude that as part of taking charge of oneself is a self-management of chronic illness entails taking responsibility for doing what it takes to properly manage your illness. It is so critical that you take charge of your health. Stress is now regarded as a neutral concept in both culture and society. It is no longer regarded as a negative concept. Filipinos have a tendency to compare themselves to Westerners, which is why are stereotyped as poor and uneducated.